Before fast food and microwaves, supper in the hills meant hearty dishes made with whatever you had on hand. These dinners carried families through hard times and left behind memories worth keeping. Here are 25 forgotten hillbilly dinners no one makes anymore. 1. Corn pone. Before sliced bread became a thing, mountain families were already perfecting their own daily staple that could outlast store-bought loaves by weeks. In the late 1800s through the Great Depression, corn pone served as the foundation of mountain survival when wheat flour cost precious cash money that families simply didn't have. Women would mix coarse cornmeal with just enough water or buttermilk to form a thick paste, adding a pinch of salt and sometimes bacon grease for richness. The mixture was shaped by hand into thick, flat cakes and either baked on a hot stone by the fire or fried in a cast-iron skillet over wood coals. The outside developed a golden, crackling crust, while the inside stayed dense and moist, with a slightly gritty texture that satisfied hunger like nothing else could. A woman's reputation often rested on her corn pone recipe. Today's cornbread mixes can't touch the staying power of hand-mixed corn pone. Don't let these recipes disappear again. Subscribe and join our retro family for more forgotten favorites. 2. Hominy. This swollen, pearl-white corn looked like something from another planet, but it packed more nutrition punch than regular corn could ever deliver. Mountain families learned hominy making from Cherokee neighbors in the early 1800s, particularly in eastern Tennessee and western North Carolina. The process involved soaking dried field corn in lye water made from hardwood ashes for days until the hulls loosened and the kernels puffed up like white balloons. Women would carefully pour boiling lye water over dried corn kernels in large iron pots, stirring with wooden paddles as the caustic solution loosened the tough outer shells. After days of soaking and multiple rinses in fresh spring water, the kernels emerged transformed, doubled in size, ghostly white, and tender enough to chew. The finished hominy could be boiled into a hearty porridge, fried crispy in pork fat, or dried again for winter storage. Modern canned hominy is a pale shadow of the hand-processed mountain variety. 3. Groundhog stew. If you think groundhogs were just for weather predictions, mountain families knew better. These plump, slow-moving rodents provided the first fresh meat after winter's lean months. In February, when families' preserved meat supplies ran dangerously low, adult males would hunt the newly awakened groundhogs emerging from hibernation. These animals had spent months building up fat reserves, making them surprisingly tender and flavorful. After skinning and cleaning, the groundhog was cut into chunks and soaked overnight in salt water to remove any wild gaminess. The meat was then browned in pork fat before being covered with water, wild onions, and whatever root vegetables the family had stored, typically potatoes, carrots, and turnips. The stew simmered for hours over a wood fire until the meat fell off the bone and the broth turned rich and golden. One groundhog could feed a family of 6 for days, making it precious winter protein when other meat was scarce. 4. Apple stack cake. No mountain wedding was complete without this towering testament to community cooperation and Appalachian ingenuity. This wasn't just dessert, it was edible architecture that could feed 50 people. Apple stack cake originated in the 1800s when sugar was expensive and hard to come by in mountain communities. Instead of traditional frosting, this cake relied on dried apples cooked down into a thick, spiced filling that acted as both flavor and mortar between thin cake layers. Each wedding guest would bring a layer, and the bride's family would provide the apple filling made from dried apples, slow-cooked with molasses, cinnamon, and sometimes a splash of moonshine. The cake was assembled like a skyscraper, with 6 to 12 thin layers stacked high and sealed together with the sticky apple mixture. After assembly, the entire cake was wrapped in cloth and left to season for days, allowing the flavors to meld and the layers to soften. The finished product looked like a sweet mountain peak and tasted like concentrated autumn. 5. Possum and sweet potatoes. Before you wrinkle your nose, understand that possum was considered fine dining in mountain communities, especially when prepared with sweet potatoes for Sunday dinner. This dish represented the pinnacle of Appalachian game cooking, turning a humble marsupial into a feast worthy of special occasions. Possums were typically caught in late fall when they'd been feeding on persimmons and acorns, giving their meat a surprisingly sweet flavor. The preparation began with careful skinning and cleaning, followed by a thorough scrubbing and overnight soaking in salt water. The possum was then parboiled to remove any remaining wild taste before being stuffed with sweet potatoes, wild onions, and sage. The whole animal was roasted slowly in a Dutch oven buried in coals, basting frequently with its own fat mixed with molasses. The sweet potatoes inside absorbed the rich, slightly sweet meat juices, while the skin turned crispy and golden. Served with cornbread and wild greens, this was mountain fine dining that would make city folks reconsider their assumptions about country cooking. 6. Squirrel and dumplings. When winter meat supplies ran low, mountain families turned to the abundant squirrels that populated every hollow and ridge. This dish transformed small game into a hearty meal that could stretch to feed unexpected company. Squirrel hunting was a rite of passage for mountain boys, and preparing squirrel and dumplings was considered essential knowledge for mountain wives. The process began with cleaning and jointing 2 or 3 squirrels, then browning the pieces in bacon grease until golden. The meat was covered with water and simmered with wild onions and herbs until tender enough to fall off the bone. Meanwhile, dumplings were made from simple ingredients: flour, salt, and enough water or milk to form a stiff dough that could be rolled thin and cut into strips. These dumplings were dropped into the bubbling squirrel broth, where they puffed up and absorbed the rich, gamey flavor. The finished dish featured tender meat swimming in thick, dumpling-studded gravy that tasted like comfort itself. One pot could feed a family for 2 meals, making it economical as well as delicious. 7. Corn dodgers. These weren't bread rolls, they were portable survival food that could keep a mountain man fed for days on the trail. Corn dodgers earned their name from Civil War soldiers who dodged bullets while eating them, but mountain families had been making them long before the war. The recipe was brutally simple: coarse cornmeal mixed with just enough water to form a stiff dough that could be shaped by hand. Some cooks added a pinch of salt or a spoonful of bacon grease, but purists made them with nothing but meal and water. The shaped dodgers were baked on hot stones around the fire or fried in a skillet until they formed a hard, golden crust that protected a dense interior. These weren't meant to be eaten fresh. Corn dodgers were designed to be carried in a pocket or pack where they'd keep for weeks without spoiling. When hunger struck, you'd gnaw on one like hardtack, letting your saliva slowly soften the rock-hard exterior. They tasted like concentrated corn and determination. 8. Turtle soup with cornbread. Mountain streams and ponds provided more than just water. They offered protein in the form of snapping turtles that could weigh 20 pounds or more. This wasn't backwoods desperation food. Turtle soup was considered a delicacy that rivaled anything served in fancy city hotels. Catching snapping turtles required courage and skill, as these prehistoric-looking creatures could snap off fingers with their powerful jaws. Once caught, the turtle was cleaned and the meat removed from the shell, revealing surprisingly tender flesh that tasted like a cross between chicken and fish. The preparation was elaborate, befitting its special status. The turtle meat was cut into chunks and slowly simmered with wild onions, herbs, and root vegetables until it fell apart. Some cooks added hard-boiled eggs and a splash of vinegar for tang. The finished soup was thick, rich, and deeply flavorful, served alongside fresh cornbread to soak up every drop. Turtle soup was reserved for special occasions and honored guests, proving that mountain cuisine could rival any city restaurant when ingredients and skill combined. 9. Rabbit fricassee. Wild rabbits provided year-round protein for mountain families, and rabbit fricassee turned this small game into an elegant dish that graced Sunday tables and special occasions. Unlike simple fried rabbit, fricassee required finesse and patience, transforming tough wild rabbit into fork-tender meat swimming in rich, creamy gravy. The process began with jointing young rabbits and soaking the pieces in salt water to remove any gamey taste. The rabbit was then dredged in seasoned flour and browned slowly in bacon grease until golden on all sides. After browning, the meat was covered with water or milk and simmered gently with wild onions and herbs until the meat practically fell off the bone. The cooking liquid was thickened with flour to create a velvety gravy that coated the tender rabbit pieces. Some mountain cooks added wild mushrooms or early spring greens to stretch the dish further. The finished fricassee was served over biscuits or cornbread, turning one small rabbit into a meal fit for company. This dish proved that mountain cooking could be as refined as any city cuisine. 10. Fried catfish and hush puppies. Mountain streams provided more than just cool water. They were home to whiskered catfish that became the centerpiece of legendary fish fries that brought entire communities together. These weren't delicate trout fishing expeditions. Catching catfish required patience, strong hands, and sometimes the courage to reach into dark holes where big cats lurked. Fresh-caught catfish were cleaned and skinned, revealing firm, white meat that was surprisingly sweet and mild despite the fish's muddy reputation. The fillets were soaked in buttermilk to remove any earthy taste, then dredged in seasoned cornmeal that created a golden, crunchy coating when fried in hot lard. Alongside the fish came hush puppies, cornmeal fritters mixed with chopped onions and dropped by spoonfuls into the same hot fat. Legend says hush puppies got their name from cooks who tossed them to barking dogs with the command, "Hush puppies." The combination of crispy outside, flaky inside catfish with hot, sweet hush puppies created a meal that satisfied both body and soul, proving that mountain cuisine could compete with any coastal seafood. 11. Pickled pig's feet and cornbread. When families butchered their yearly hog, nothing went to waste, including the feet that became a treasured delicacy through the ancient art of pickling. This wasn't desperation food. Properly prepared pickled pig's feet were considered a treat that graced special occasion tables and provided protein-rich sustenance through long winters. The preparation began immediately after butchering, while the feet were fresh and clean. The pig's feet were thoroughly scrubbed and boiled until the meat was tender and the skin gelatinous. Hot vinegar seasoned with bay leaves, peppercorns, and salt was poured over the cooked feet, which were then packed into stone crocks or glass jars. After weeks of curing, the pig's feet emerged transformed. The meat falling off the bone, the skin silky and flavorful, all permeated with tangy, spiced vinegar. Served cold with fresh cornbread to soak up the flavorful pickling liquid, this dish provided essential protein and made every part of the precious hog last through winter. The gelatin-rich broth was considered especially nourishing for pregnant women and growing children. 12. Leather britches. Don't let the name fool you. These weren't pants, but green beans transformed into leathery strips that could hang from the rafters all winter long. This preservation method turned summer's abundance into winter's sustenance without requiring expensive canning equipment or precious salt. The process began during peak bean season, when mountain gardens produced more fresh beans than families could eat. Young, tender green beans were strung on heavy thread using a large needle, creating long garlands that looked like green necklaces. These bean strings were hung from kitchen rafters, porch ceilings, or attic beams where air could circulate freely around them. Over several weeks, the beans dried into brown, wrinkled strips that rattled like leather when touched, hence the name leather britches. Come winter, handfuls of the dried beans were soaked overnight to rehydrate, then cooked slowly with fatback or bacon until tender. The finished beans had a concentrated, slightly smoky flavor that fresh beans couldn't match. This ancient preservation method kept families fed with vegetables long after gardens lay buried under snow. 13. Fatback. Before refrigeration, fatback was the bacon that never went bad, pure pork fat that served as both seasoning and survival food for mountain families. This wasn't the streaky bacon we know today, but thick slabs of pure fat from the pig's back that could be stored for months without spoiling when properly cured with salt. Mountain families depended on fatback to add flavor and essential calories to otherwise bland survival foods. Sliced thin, fatback was fried slowly until it rendered into crispy cracklings swimming in pure lard. Both the cracklings and the rendered fat were culinary gold. The cracklings added crunch and porky flavor to cornbread, while the lard was saved for cooking everything from vegetables to desserts. A small piece of fatback could transform a pot of beans or greens from subsistence food into something approaching luxury. The fat provided essential calories that helped mountain families survive harsh winters when fresh food was scarce. Fatback was also portable protein that could be carried on hunting trips or work expeditions, providing energy and flavor when times got tough. 14. Southern beans and cornbread. This wasn't just a meal, it was the foundation of mountain survival, a perfect protein combination that could sustain families through the leanest times. The magic happened when dried beans and cornmeal joined forces, creating a complete protein that rivaled expensive meat in nutritional value. Mountain families grew their own beans, usually tough varieties like pintos or navy beans that could withstand harsh weather and poor soil. These dried beans were soaked overnight, then slow-cooked for hours with a piece of fatback or ham hock until they became creamy and rich. The cooking process was an art form. Too little water, and the beans burned. Too much, and they became watery soup. Meanwhile, cornbread was mixed fresh using stone-ground cornmeal, buttermilk, and a touch of bacon grease. The bread baked in a preheated cast-iron skillet, creating a crusty bottom and tender crumb that was perfect for soaking up bean pot liquor. Together, beans and cornbread provided everything the human body needed to thrive, making this combination the backbone of Appalachian cuisine and the reason mountain families could survive in isolation for generations. 15. Corn chowder. When sweet corn season peaked in late summer, mountain families turned surplus ears into rich, creamy chowder that could feed a crowd and celebrate the harvest. This wasn't thin corn soup, it was thick, substantial chowder that could serve as a complete meal when accompanied by fresh biscuits or cornbread. The preparation began with cutting fresh corn kernels off the cob, but the real flavor came from scraping the cobs with a knife to extract the sweet, milky liquid that would thicken the chowder naturally. The corn and its milk were combined with diced potatoes, wild onions, and sometimes salt pork or bacon for richness. The mixture was simmered slowly until the potatoes broke down and the corn released its starch, creating a naturally thick, creamy texture without the need for flour or cream. Some mountain cooks added fresh milk or cream when available, but the dish was designed to be delicious even when dairy products were scarce. The finished chowder was sweet, savory, and satisfying, a bowl full of summer sunshine that could warm the soul even as autumn chills began to creep into the mountains. 16. Wild greens mess. Spring's arrival in the mountains was announced not by calendars, but by the emergence of wild greens that could save families from scurvy and add fresh vitamins to winter-weary bodies. This wasn't casual salad gathering, it was serious foraging that required extensive knowledge of what was safe to eat and what could kill you. Mountain women passed down identification skills through generations, teaching daughters to recognize pokeweed, lamb's quarters, wild spinach, dandelion greens, and dozens of other edible plants. The gathering expedition was a social event, with women and children spreading across hillsides with baskets, collecting enough greens for immediate eating and drying for later use. The preparation was simple, but crucial. Most wild greens were boiled twice to remove bitterness and potential toxins, then sautéed with bacon grease or fatback for flavor. The finished mess of greens was piled high on plates, providing essential nutrients that had been missing from winter diets of preserved meat and stored grains. This dish represented the deep connection between mountain families and their environment, proving that survival required intimate knowledge of the natural world. 17th Ramp Dinner. Few foods could divide a mountain community like ramps, wild leeks that grew in shaded hollows and possessed an odor so powerful they could clear a room. Yet, ramp dinners were among the most celebrated community events in Appalachian culture, marking spring's arrival with pungent festivities that lasted for days. Ramps looked innocent enough, slender green shoots with broad leaves and white bulbs, but their onion garlic flavor was so intense it could be detected on someone's breath for a week after eating. Mountain families organized ramp dinners as community celebrations, with entire hollows gathering to cook and consume vast quantities of these wild leeks. The preparation was simple. Ramps were cleaned thoroughly, then fried with eggs, bacon, or potatoes, or eaten raw with cornbread and beans. The social aspect was as important as the nutritional. Ramp dinners were an excuse for neighbors to gather, share news, and strengthen community bonds. Children were often excused from school the day after ramp dinners because the smell was so overwhelming. These pungent celebrations proved that mountain food was about more than just survival. It was about community, tradition, and embracing what the mountains provided. 18. Pork ribs with sauerkraut. German immigrants who settled in mountain regions brought their sauerkraut-making skills, which perfectly complemented the abundant wild hogs that roamed Appalachian forests. This combination created a dish that was both exotic and completely mountain at the same time. Wild hogs, descendants of escaped domestic pigs, provided free-range pork with more flavor than any store-bought variety. Mountain hunters tracked these intelligent, dangerous animals through dense forests, and successful hunts provided families with fresh pork that needed to be preserved quickly. Meanwhile, mountain gardens produced cabbage that could be fermented into tangy sauerkraut using ancient German techniques adapted to mountain conditions. The ribs were cut from fresh killed hogs and slowly braised with the homemade sauerkraut, creating a dish where the tangy fermented cabbage balanced the rich, fatty pork perfectly. The cooking process took hours, with the meat becoming so tender it fell off the bone, while the sauerkraut mellowed and absorbed the porky flavors. This dish represented the cultural mixing that made mountain cuisine unique. Old World techniques applied to New World ingredients, creating something entirely American, yet tied to ancient traditions. 19. Burgoo. This wasn't soup. It was liquid community, a massive stew that could feed hundreds and turn any gathering into a celebration. Burgoo originated as a way to use whatever meat and vegetables were available, creating a dish that was different every time, but always satisfying. Traditional burgoo required a community effort, with neighbors contributing ingredients and taking turns stirring the massive pot that could hold 20 gallons or more. The base usually started with whatever meat was available: rabbit, squirrel, chicken, beef, pork, or even wild game like deer or bear. Vegetables were added according to season and availability: corn, lima beans, tomatoes, okra, potatoes, onions. The key was slow cooking over wood fires, with designated stirrers taking shifts to prevent sticking and ensure even cooking. After hours of simmering, the ingredients melded into a thick, rich stew that was served with cornbread and became the centerpiece of church gatherings, political rallies, and community celebrations. Each family's burgoo was slightly different, reflecting their available ingredients and cooking traditions, making every batch a unique expression of mountain resourcefulness and community spirit. 20. Persimmon bread. When the first frost sweetened wild persimmons hanging from mountain trees, families knew it was time to gather these orange globes for one of the mountain's most treasured desserts. Persimmon bread wasn't just a seasonal treat, it was autumn concentrated into loaf form, capturing the essence of mountain fall in every slice. Wild persimmons were smaller and more intensely flavored than cultivated varieties, with a sweetness that was almost tropical, but balanced by subtle astringency. Gathering persimmons was a family activity, with children climbing trees and adults catching the ripe fruit in sheets spread below. The persimmons had to be perfectly ripe. Too early and they'd pucker your mouth, too late and they'd be mushy. The fruit was pressed through sieves to create smooth pulp that formed the base of the bread. Mixed with flour, sugar, eggs, and spices, the persimmon pulp created a dense, moist bread that tasted like autumn itself, sweet, spicy, and complex. The finished loaves were dark orange with a texture somewhere between banana bread and pound cake. Persimmon bread could be stored for weeks, improving with age as the flavors melded and deepened. 21. Corn silk tea. While city folks threw away corn husks and silk as waste, mountain families knew these scraps held powerful medicine that could treat everything from kidney problems to high blood pressure. This wasn't superstition. Modern science has confirmed that corn silk contains compounds with genuine therapeutic properties. During corn season, mountain women carefully saved the silky threads that protected each ear of corn, spreading them on screens to dry in the sun. The dried silk was stored in glass jars or cloth bags, ready to be brewed into healing tea throughout the year. The preparation was simple. A handful of dried corn silk was steeped in boiling water for 10 minutes, creating a pale golden tea with a mild, slightly sweet flavor. Mountain healers prescribed corn silk tea for urinary troubles, swelling, and women's problems, and many families drank it regularly as a general health tonic. The tea was considered safe enough for children and pregnant women, making it a go-to remedy when other medicines weren't available. This humble beverage represented the mountain philosophy of waste nothing and use everything. Even corn's silky hair had value for those who knew its secrets. Hoover stew. This bitter-named dish became America's reluctant lifeline during the Great Depression's darkest days. Named mockingly after President Herbert Hoover during the 1930s economic collapse, this stew was born from empty pantries and broken promises. Families across rural America threw together whatever scraps they could find, creating sustenance that was equal parts meal and social commentary. The preparation was creative desperation. Start with diced potatoes and onions if available. Add any vegetables, turnips, carrots, cabbage, even dandelion greens. The meat might be bacon fat, a ham bone, or cheap cuts, if lucky. Everything simmered in water with salt, pepper, and wild herbs. The result was thin, watery stew that somehow filled bellies and lifted spirits. This became the great equalizer during America's crisis. Rich families who'd lost everything found themselves eating alongside poor neighbors. It's the original stone soup of American hardship. Mock apple pie. The pie that fooled everyone, made with crackers instead of apples, yet tasted exactly like the real thing. During the Great Depression and World War II rationing, when fresh fruit was scarce and expensive, this ingenious dessert proved that American creativity knew no bounds. Ritz crackers became the secret ingredient that somehow transformed into tender, spiced apples that could fool even the most discerning palate. The alchemy was pure kitchen magic. Crush Ritz crackers into chunks and layer them in pastry. Create a syrup from water, sugar, cream of tartar, and lemon juice, the exact combination that mimicked apple's natural acids and sugars. Pour this over crackers with cinnamon and nutmeg. As it baked, the crackers absorbed the spiced syrup, swelling and softening into something that had the exact texture and flavor of cooked apples. This pie represented wartime ingenuity at its finest. Families could serve a traditional American dessert when apple orchards were bare and grocery store fruit was beyond reach. It became a symbol of making do with what you had. Today's apple pies, despite using real fruit, rarely match the nostalgic satisfaction of this clever Depression-era deception. Scrapple, the ultimate waste not, want not dish that transformed pig scraps into breakfast gold. Born in Pennsylvania Dutch country during the 1600s, Scrapple proved that true cuisine came from using every part of the animal. When families butchered hogs, nothing was wasted, and Scrapple was the delicious proof that scraps could be transformed into something genuinely sought after. The process was part preservation, part culinary art. Simmer pork scraps, organs, and bones until meat fell apart. Remove bones, chop remaining meat finely. Strain the cooking liquid and return to pot with chopped meat. Slowly whisk in cornmeal and spices, stirring constantly to prevent lumps. Cook until thick as mush, then pour into loaf pans to set. Slice and fry until golden and crispy outside, creamy inside. This wasn't poverty food, it was resourceful cooking that created something genuinely delicious. Pennsylvanian families served Scrapple with pride, alongside eggs and pancakes for hearty breakfasts that could fuel farm work all day. Modern breakfast meats can't match Scrapple's complex flavor and satisfying texture that turned waste into one of America's most beloved regional specialties. Creamed corn on toast. Before fancy brunches, this simple dish proved that comfort food didn't need complexity to satisfy completely. During the Great Depression and war years, creamed corn on toast became the answer to "What's for dinner?" when pantries were nearly bare. A can of corn, some milk, flour, and day-old bread transformed into a meal that was surprisingly filling and satisfying, proving that simple ingredients could create real comfort. The preparation was pure comfort food simplicity. Make a basic white sauce by melting butter, whisking in flour, then slowly adding milk until smooth and thickened. Stir in canned or fresh corn kernels, seasoning with salt, pepper, and sometimes a touch of sugar to enhance the corn's natural sweetness. Serve over thick slices of toasted bread, letting the creamy corn soak into the toast. This wasn't just cheap food, it was comfort that could soothe both body and spirit during difficult times. Children looked forward to creamed corn nights, and adults found genuine satisfaction in this humble combination. The dish represented American resourcefulness, taking basic pantry staples and creating something that felt indulgent and special, proving that luxury was more about preparation than price. Victory Garden Soup. This patriotic soup turned backyard vegetables into nourishing meals that supported both family and country. During World War II, when food rationing was the norm and waste not, want not was national policy, Victory Garden Soup became the delicious symbol of homefront sacrifice and ingenuity. Families grew their own vegetables not just to save money, but to support the war effort. And this soup was how they turned that patriotic gardening into satisfying meals. The preparation was flexible patriotism. Start with whatever vegetables were ready for harvest. tomatoes, carrots, beans, corn, squash, potatoes. Sauté onions in a bit of oil or bacon fat. Add chopped vegetables in order of cooking time, then cover with water or homemade stock. Season with herbs grown in the same victory garden. Simmer until vegetables were tender and flavors melded into something greater than individual parts. This soup represented American resilience and unity. Every spoonful was a small act of patriotism, proving that families could thrive even during wartime shortages. Modern vegetable soups can't match the satisfaction of this wartime creation that nourished both bodies and spirits during America's greatest challenge. Vinegar pie. This impossibly simple pie proved that 3 basic ingredients could create dessert magic that rivaled expensive pies. During the Great Depression, when eggs, butter, and fruit were luxuries, vinegar pie became the miracle dessert that could satisfy sweet cravings with just pantry staples. The name sounds terrible, but the result was something that tasted remarkably like lemon meringue pie, proving that chemistry could work miracles in desperate times. The magic was in the simplicity. Mix sugar, flour, and white vinegar with water to create a custard-like filling. The vinegar provided the same tart brightness that lemon would in expensive pies. Pour into a pastry shell and bake until set and slightly golden. Some versions included beaten egg whites folded in for lightness, but even without eggs, the result was surprisingly satisfying. This pie represented Depression-era ingenuity at its finest. Families could serve real dessert when there was no money for fancy ingredients. Children never suspected they were eating poverty pie. They just knew it was sweet, tart, and delicious. Modern pies, with their expensive ingredients, rarely provide the same satisfaction as this humble creation that proved sweetness didn't require wealth. Corn Dodgers. These simple cornmeal cakes were the daily bread of frontier families, quick, filling, and made from ingredients that traveled well. From the earliest American settlements through the Civil War era, corn dodgers were the reliable staple that kept families fed when wheat flour was unavailable or too expensive. The name came from their simple preparation, just cornmeal, water, and salt, dodged together quickly and cooked over open fires. The preparation was frontier simplicity. Mix coarse cornmeal with hot water and salt to form a stiff dough. Shape into small, flat cakes with wet hands. Cook on a hot griddle, in a Dutch oven, or even on a clean rock beside the fire until golden brown and crusty outside, tender inside. The exterior formed a satisfying crust while the interior stayed soft and corn-sweet. These weren't just bread, they were survival food that could be made anywhere with minimal ingredients. Travelers, soldiers, and frontier families relied on corn dodgers when nothing else was available.